I'm King Link and it's time for the Xbox Game Pass August 2021 review. This is something new on my channel. If you're already familiar with my work, you may know that I review the Humble Choice games the first week of every month and talk about who's going to enjoy which games and if the bundle itself is worth picking up. Xbox Game Pass, though, is different. It's a subscription service where players can play any title on it and games get released throughout the month. I'm going to do my best to cover the major releases here, as well as a variety of other games, and my channel is primarily focused on the PC platform, so that's going to be the platform of choice for these games. And for these videos, I'll be doing short reviews for each title, and I'm going to be talking about the most notable and unique games that I've found. These aren't intended to be full reviews, however, unlike the Humble Choice and its time constraints, I continue playing these games beyond the first hour, usually between 3 to 4 hours for all the titles, and that seems pretty good. This is something new, so if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll be reviewing games in a pseudo-random order, also known as the order that I've played them in. So let's get started with what's on screen, Project Wingman. Ace Combat has over 10 titles in its franchise, so it's not really a surprise that someone else tried to capitalize on the success of that series. Project Wingman ticks most of the same boxes. Simplified flight controls with high-octane combat? Check. 21 missions of about 30 minutes each? Check. A story that doesn't really connect with the player? Check, sadly. Project Wingman is an air combat simulator where players fly generic named versions of planes like the MiG-21, fighting for air superiority and taking out targets all over the place. The gameplay is a bit basic, almost everything is blowing up targets and trying not to get hit, and the difficulty is a bit easy, but without checkpoints that's probably a good thing, as any mistake can reset the entire mission. I know the story here is trying hard, and I did find myself interested in the conflict at first, but the story scenes are just weak 3D overlays of the upcoming missions, and nothing really major happens, especially in the missions. It would be an issue, but Ace Combat struggled with that for decades. The fact is, it's probably hard to have a compelling story when players are stuck flying a plane for the entire game. Check this out if you like Ace Combat. If you haven't played Ace Combat and like what you're seeing, this is a pretty good look-alike for that series to try out. However, this is plane combat with rather unrealistic physics as you're seeing in the gameplay. If you want more realism in your flight sim, well, of course there's Flight Simulator on Game Pass, and if you're not sure, this might not be for you. Lethal League Blaze. I reviewed this game for Humble Choice in September 2020, I played the game after that point, and now after playing this version of the game, I've actually played this title for over 10 hours on both services combined. That alone is a pretty good sign. Lethal League Blaze is the second game in this unique fighter franchise. It looks like a sports game, but make no mistake, this is a pure fighting game where players will hit a ball and use it to strike the opponents. This can quickly become an intense match as that ball starts to travel faster and faster. There is a story mode as well as an old-style arcade mode, but that's about it for the single-player offerings. I was able to beat the entire story in the arcade mode in under 3 hours, and even then I took my time this time around. The online feels a bit dead, but there are still a few people playing according to Steam charts, and I was able to find a match, but the skill level on display here was really high. I did have a lot of fun playing the game though, and if I had a group of people who all wanted to learn the rules of the game and battle it out, this would absolutely be enjoyable. Check this out if you want to play this with friends, especially in couch co-op mode. It's a pretty inventive game with solid combat. However, if you're going to be playing this solo, I feel like you're going to be missing out as the single player offerings on display are a little weak. Last Stop. I'm a fan of whatever genre this is. I call the genre like 3D visual novels or Telltale games, but games like Life is Strange are interesting to me. And Last Stop, however, well, really misses that bar. There's a lot of quirkiness I have to forgive to play this game. The concepts in the game are interesting for a moment, but the writing is as if they wrote down the first thing that popped into their head for every scene. There's not really clever dialogue or moments in this game, it's just whatever you would expect a character to say in that situation. The actual story is acceptable, it's just that the writing really suffers. The real problem is the gameplay is just dull. Everything is guessing where the game wants you to walk and seeing a conversation play out or a small action, then doing the same thing again and again. The dialogue has 3 choices for every prompt, but the character doesn't even use the words on the chosen card. Sometimes it's a false choice and the character will say the same thing no matter what you choose, but most players aren't going to realize that. These choices don't seem to change the story at all either. Pick this up if you need a Telltale game that lacks flavor or even choices that matter in the least. I'm sure some people can enjoy themselves, but I felt it was lacking even the bare minimum to keep me playing, and I found myself starting to play on my phone while the story played on because of how low my interest and interactivity was. Since we're on Game Pass, I would recommend a couple other games instead. Grim Fandango is an easy recommendation. I haven't played them yet, but Kathy Rain and Dark Pictures' Man of Medea will probably be a little more entertaining than this one as well. Dodgeball Academia. I've loved video game dodgeball since I played Super Dodgeball on the NES, and I think the developers of Dodgeball Academia are in that same camp. Dodgeball Academia has excellent graphics, story, and gameplay, but at the end of the day, this is just a beautiful game that's an homage to that classic Super Dodgeball. It's far better, but it's just clear where they got the idea from, and of course that's not a bad thing because it's so well done. The writing also feels like it comes from a classic Super NES RPG. The RPG elements feel so rewarding, and by the end of the second chapter, the difficulty actually finally kicked in, and I couldn't believe how good this game feels. I love the idea that we might see more sports-based RPGs because Dodgeball Academia feels extremely fresh and fun. Pick this up if you like the idea of dodgeball and RPGs. It's right at the corner of those two fandoms. There's a very strange Pokemon-esque feeling for how short some of the matches are, but at the same time, as solid as an RPG this game is fully focused on gamified version of dodgeball, so get ready to dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Lumines Remastered. When Tetris came out, it was both instantly playable and challenging, and I've often wondered how difficult it is to get a simplistic game like that just right. When Lumines came out in 2004 for the PlayStation Portable, I was floored because it was able to hit that same mark. Lumines has players managing falling blocks and trying to collect them so they make squares of the same color, and what you're seeing is the game. There are multiple different stages, or skins as they're called, each with a different song, style, and slightly different BPM, but the entire game is focused on that 2x2 falling blocks in two colors, no more and no less. There's a lot of different modes as well. A standard challenge, a burst CPU mode, puzzles, missions, time attack, and more. It also has a great addictive quality, and the music is fantastic, which, yeah, I'm not going to risk here. This was easily one of my favorite games when it was released, and that easy to learn and possible to master vibe is very strong here. Pick this up if you like Tetris or other arcade puzzle games. This game has fantastic music, so if you want to groove out to a variety of beats, you can. There's also enough side modes for you to keep coming back and finding something different, but I do mean it when I say there's not much more than what you're seeing here. Katamari Damacy REROLL. This is a remaster of a classic PS2 title, and one of the oddest games ever. You play as the prince, and your father, the king of the cosmos, has destroyed the night sky, and now he's asking your help to rebuild it. Why, thanks, Dad. The entire game of Katamari Damacy is a strange experience where you have to roll up objects creating new stars of varying sizes. You collect objects in different areas that range from a small room in a house to the entire world. Everything is based on size though. Your Katamari grows bigger from collecting normal items, which then allows you to constantly collect bigger and bigger items. Katamari Damacy is fun, but there's a few problems with this title. First, it's pretty much the same game and graphics as the original PS2 title. It's also only 10 main levels and 9 bonus levels. While the 10 levels eventually take longer and longer, the game just made me want later Katamari titles, which felt like they had a lot more content. There's also not a ton of challenge in the game other than mastering the tank controls for moving the Katamari. Still, it's a fun experience, and man, the music in this game is awesome. Just hearing the songs made me want to play more. I own this game on Steam and actually made a video about the title and how it stands the test of time. I'll link it at the end. Pick this up if you want a bizarre game. You won't find a game like this anywhere else, and yet it's so fun and unique that it's worth checking out. If you only want a specific genre of a game, this probably won't be that. But if you can accept a game outside of what you've seen before, you're probably in for a fun ride. And a small note, you have to beat the tutorial before you'll be allowed to change the display settings. That's annoying enough that I'd mention it for new players. Omno. It's really hard to talk about Omno without mentioning Journey. Both are picturesque games with no dialogue where players are filled with a sense of discovery and wonder. What's interesting is Omno actually comes from a single developer, and the more I learn about its development, the more I've been impressed by it. The world and creatures of Omno are fantastic, as is the level design. Everything evokes a clear desire to explore and discover pieces of this world. It's a 3 to 4 hour journey, but it's one that continually changes the world, giving players small areas to explore with interesting puzzles. I really only have 2 minor complaints with Omno. The in-game UI is a bit rough, though by learning this was made by a single developer it does make sense, but it doesn't fix that issue. Also, there's some writing in the game, and I actually feel like it takes away from the adventure to have to stop and read something. These are very minor issues, but it's something I'd like to bring up. Pick this up if you like Journey or just want a serene Zen-like experience filled with solid puzzles and beautiful locations as well as wonderful creatures. There's no combat, there's not really a massive challenge here, but it's such an enjoyable trip that I didn't miss those things. Atomicrops. To get it out of the way, this game looks like Stardew Valley, but really isn't anything like that. It's a roguelike shooter with a farming system at the core of its economy, but really it's closer to Enter the Gungeon or such. Players will be constantly dealing with enemies to farm items to bolster their currency. The game has two phases, a day phase where players are supposed to be farming seeds, fertilizer, and items, and a night phase where they have to defend their crops and homeland. The exploration feels really nice if a bit rushed because of the time mechanics. This game actually took me a while to get used to. I played for about 2 hours and really wasn't enjoying myself, but then something clicked. I started to be able to avoid more damage by dodging out of the way and bought guns, which lasted only one day for the bosses, and suddenly I actually was having a blast. Pick this up if you like roguelites or want to play a strange one. It's a good mix between farming, bullet hell shooters, and exploring randomized areas. It will take a decent amount of time to get into, so be prepared for a rougher start before everything clicks in place. But this is not a roguelike Stardew, so really trust me when I say don't expect that. Raji, an Ancient Epic. This is a game about Indian mythology created by an Indian team and has a strong female lead. This really feels fresh when you consider there's not many games focused on Hinduism, and the only ones that come to mind is Asura's Wrath and Smite, and of course that second one is a cop-out. In Raji, you play a young girl who's chasing after her captured brother, and the journey takes you through multiple beautiful locations where you fight various enemies. The graphics look great and there's some solid animation work. I especially like how the main character incorporates her acrobatic past into her battle repertoire. On the other hand, the levels are a little long and the combat is often merely okay. It's enjoyable but never really reaches a high bar. There's so many interesting concepts in the gameplay though that I think it's acceptable. It just could be better. Pick this up if you want a solid adventure. I tried really hard to come up with a game that is similar to, and the only one I could think of is Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. While the combat isn't strong, I do think the uniqueness of covering Hindu gods with the main narration provided by Vishnu and Durga is fresh enough to be worthy of checking out. The Ascent. This is a role-playing game that really reminds me of Diablo. Much of the game is exploring levels and maps, killing enemies, and going wherever the current quest tells you. The setting and story are interesting and really play up the cyberpunk aesthetic, and it really gets that genre right. The combat is a mix between a twin-stick shooter and an action game with a cover mechanic that allows you to duck behind objects and shoot around them. The downside is, while the setting feels great, there are long stretches of fighting the same enemy over and over. There really doesn't seem to be too much different between the objectives of the game, and the fixed direction isometric camera can be a real hindrance when enemies come from the direction of the camera. Pick this up if you like role-playing games and can accept that fixed direction camera. I enjoyed my 3 hours with this game, but I also kind of was happy to put it down and move on from it. I might return, but I'm not sure if this will keep my interest, and I do typically like role-playing games. Cris Tales. This is an RPG with time mechanics. Players start as Crisbell and meets Christopher, and thus it's Cris Tales. Okay, yeah, that's a groaner, but I think it's intentional too. Much of the game is focused on Crisbell, who gets magic time powers suddenly in the game. The gameplay mostly revolves around the typical RPG attacks that get twisted by the addition of time power, such as poisoning an enemy for slow damage over time, but then warping to the future and all of a sudden that poison damage is applied all at once. You can also take an older, stronger enemy and time warp them to a younger, easier to kill form, or vice versa. As a game, Cris Tales has interesting concepts, but I really wasn't hooked by the story. The art style didn't really appeal to me either, and the gameplay is interesting but doesn't feel particularly deep. I did spend 3 hours with the game, and I probably won't return. There's nothing that bad, but it's just nothing compelling yet either. Pick this up if you love the art style here or really want an RPG. It's an okay RPG, but if there's a few other RPGs on the service, I'd pick those first. At the same time, this is a slow, turn-based RPG, and while there's a couple of good concepts at its core, I just don't know if it creates a compelling game on its own. Curse of the Dead Gods. This is a roguelite with some fresh ideas. It looks a lot like Hades, probably because it was inspired by that style. At the same time, Curse of the Dead Gods brings a ton of new concepts to the table, and through them feel like a fresh experience. Curse of the Dead Gods' big addition is the addition of curses. Players gain corruption due to multiple different actions such as finishing a room, which gives 20 corruption, and if they reach 100 points of corruption, they'll be cursed when they leave the current room. These are curses in name only. Most curses actually have a positive aspect along with a negative. There's also a deep weapon system, relics which give bonuses, and a gold or corruption purchase system. Curse of the Dead Gods feels pretty unique, even though it's very clear what inspired it. Also, it has a Slay the Spire type map, which works very well. I was able to finish the first 3 maps, though struggled a bit early on. Similar to most roguelites, the master strategy is, of course, not to get hit and hit the enemy, but there's a good system beyond that to make the combat feel interesting and unique on each attempt. Pick up Curse of the Dead Gods if you enjoyed Hades or like action-based roguelites. If you hate the repetitive nature of roguelites, you'll probably dislike this. If you're unsure, well, I would normally suggest you try it out, but actually Hades is already on the service. Trust me, just play that, or wait for my review of it next month. Bug Fables: The Everlasting Sapling. I can't look at this art style without thinking about Paper Mario, and that's a good comparison. The graphics are similar, the combat requires players to hit different buttons in time with attacks, and the writing feels the same. Bug Fables has the player in control of a team of 3 bugs and is on a quest to get artifacts for the Ant Queen, which will hopefully help her find the Everlasting Sapling. There's actually a feeling that the story will take a turn at some point and dive deeper into a story about political betrayal and such. Gameplay-wise, this can be a challenging game, especially if players add in the hard mode badge, which makes the enemies slightly stronger. With limited item space and limited healing options, every decision in battle is important, and you really feel the effects of every time you miss the timing of an attack or defense. Pick this up if you enjoy Paper Mario or like RPGs, which give bonuses for properly timed attacks and defense. This isn't a very active RPG, but it's also not a completely passive one as well. Still, the turn-based aspects of the typical RPG gameplay are at the core here, so if you don't like slower RPGs, you probably can skip this one. So those are the titles for this month's video. What do I think about the service as a whole? Well, it was my first month on Xbox Game Pass, and I'm pretty impressed. There were quite a few games I'm thrilled to have checked out. I'll even list a few of my favorite in a minute. The quality bar is quite a bit higher than the humble choice, and this was hardly every game that came out over the month. At the same time, okay, there's an elephant in the room. These games aren't owned. This is a service, so if you stop paying, you lose access to the Xbox Game Pass and all the games, and similarly, at some point in the future, most of these games will leave the service. That's not a massive negative, mind you, but it's one that I think we should consider. Though the idea should be there's a constant flow of titles that replace those that leave, and I do see those coming in the next month. In this case, I'm extremely glad I got to sample so many titles for cheap. I know which games I'm going to be continuing and playing and which games I won't be picking up again. I also plan on beating a few games and reviewing them on my website, kinglinkreviews.com, little plug there. A couple of reviews should already be up there. But I got my $15 worth, and I'm quite glad. It actually appears that xCloud support is coming to PC or is already here. I've had a little trouble trying to get that, but maybe in the near future we'll be taking a look at that. And I do want to look at games that are already on the service, such as Dragon Quest Builders 2 or River City Girls, just 2 games I've been interested in for some time. I ran out of time this month. On Humble, I normally talk about the strongest and weakest of the month. With a service like Game Pass and a lack of choices, I don't know if we need to talk about the weakest. I'll just give you the 5 strongest for this month. These are the games I think you definitely should check out. The 5th strongest of the month is Lumines Remastered. This is definitely one of the oldest titles I played this month, but man, I still love this game and its unique musical style. There's a great hypnotic beat and a wonderful way it creates a unique soundscape that should not be missed. The 4th strongest of the month is Omno. I'd actually recommend trying to finish this one. As it's only 3 or 4 hours long, it's a short experience, but it's quite beautiful and enjoyable to explore this land. In fact, if you're a completionist, getting all the achievements here won't be too hard either. The 3rd strongest of this month is Curse of the Dead Gods, and I really want this game to be higher, but I don't know if I can trust it for the end game. I've played 3 hours, I'm sure I'll play more, but it just hasn't done enough to sit in the pantheon of amazing roguelites just yet. Still, it's worth checking out. The 2nd strongest of the month is Raji, an ancient epic. Indian mythology is rare enough that I think this title deserves more attention just because of the subject matter. The gameplay is good, and I quite enjoyed the experience. And the strongest of this month is, Dodgeball Academia. I really do love this game. That super dodgeball flavor done as a more modern title makes me extremely happy. I love the RPG aspects, and I love the style in this game. I get excited every time I win a match. And that's what I have for Xbox Game Pass for this month. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. What games did I miss that need more attention? What game was your favorite? Or which game should I consider covering for the next month? Also, if you're interested, I'll be covering a decent number of these games on my Twitch channel. I'll leave a link in the description. It is kinglink_reviews. The idea is the stream is intended to be more of a games club. If you're already playing these games, feel free to swing by, discuss the games, or just let everyone know what you're thinking. And if you're curious for hotter takes or seeing more recent games, that's the place to be. If you've enjoyed this, consider subscribing and ringing that bell to be notified when I upload new videos, and throw a like or dislike at the video, whichever you think it's earned. I'm going to be linking that video I did on Katamari Damacy REROLL, and both why and how it's a timeless classic, as well as another video. Until then, I'm King Link, and thanks for watching.